The biting winter wind howled through the mountain pass, carrying with it the promise of death for anyone foolish enough to brave its fury. Beau Quincy, a man whose name had become synonymous with danger across 3 territories, urged his exhausted horse forward through the thickening snow. His reputation as the Reaper had made him both feared and respected throughout Wyoming Territory in 1876, but even his notoriety couldn't protect him from nature's wrath. The blizzard had caught him off guard, forcing him to seek shelter before nightfall claimed both him and his loyal mount. Squinting through the swirling white, Beau spotted what appeared to be a dark lump against the pristine snow about 50 yards ahead. Likely a fallen tree, he thought, until a slight movement caught his eye. Drawing his revolver cautiously, Beau approached. What he found stopped even his hardened heart cold. A woman lay half buried in snow, her face ashen, lips blue, and body trembling violently. She couldn't have been more than 20, with auburn hair spilling out from beneath a woolen bonnet. Her threadbare dress and tattered shawl were woefully inadequate for the brutal conditions. "Madam," Beau called, holstering his weapon and dismounting in one fluid motion. "Can you hear me?" Her eyelids fluttered, revealing eyes the color of summer sage before closing again. A weak moan escaped her blue lips. Without hesitation, Beau lifted her seemingly weightless body and draped her across his saddle before mounting behind her. She was barely clinging to life, and Beau knew his abandoned line shack was her only chance for survival. It was a risk bringing her there, his hideout known to no one, but something in those brief moments when their eyes met compelled him to act. The ride to the shack tested every ounce of Beau's considerable skill. The woman had fallen unconscious, and he had to hold her body against his with one arm while navigating the treacherous terrain. By the time the crude wooden structure came into view, his muscles burned with fatigue. Inside the Spartan cabin, Beau worked quickly, building a fire in the stone hearth before turning his attention to the woman. Her clothing was soaked through, her skin like ice. Practicality overrode propriety as he removed her wet garments, wrapped her in his spare blankets, and placed her on the narrow cot near the fire. As warmth gradually returned to the cabin, Beau studied the stranger he'd rescued. Despite the dirt and windburn on her face, she possessed a delicate beauty. Her hands, though reddened by cold, were smooth and uncalloused, not the hands of someone accustomed to harsh labor. A small silver locket hung around her neck, the only possession that seemed of any value. Beau had spent the last 8 years avoiding entanglements of any kind, especially with women. His life was one of solitude by necessity, not choice. The bounties on his head ensured that attachments were dangerous for him, and anyone unfortunate enough to be associated with him. Yet here he was, tending to a half-dead woman who represented everything he'd been avoiding: vulnerability, responsibility, connection. The woman stirred, coughing weakly. Beau held a tin cup of melted snow to her lips. "Drink," he commanded, his voice gruff from disuse. She obeyed instinctively, swallowing the water before her eyes flew open in panic. She tried to scramble away but lacked the strength. "Easy," Beau said, softening his tone. "You're safe. Found you half frozen in the snow, brought you to my cabin to warm up." Her eyes darted around the small space before settling on his face. Who are you?" Her voice was barely audible, raspy from the cold. "Name's Beau Quincy." He deliberately omitted any mention of his notorious alias. "I'm Abigail," she whispered. "Abigail Rosewood." "What were you doing out there alone in a blizzard, Miss Rosewood?" Her face crumpled. "Running. They killed my father. Said I was next." Beau's expression remained impassive, but inwardly he cursed. Trouble had found him despite his best efforts to avoid it. "Who's they?" he asked, though he suspected he already knew the answer. Hargrove's men. She confirmed his suspicion. My father refused to sell our land. They shot him right in front of me. Victor Hargrove was a name Beau knew well, a cattle baron with political aspirations who'd been systematically acquiring land throughout Wyoming Territory by whatever means necessary. The man had no qualms about murder if it served his purposes. And you escaped? Abigail nodded weakly. Ran for 2 days. Then the storm. Her voice trailed off as exhaustion claimed her again. Beau sighed heavily, running a hand through his dark hair. The smart move would be to nurse her back to minimal health, point her toward the nearest town, and disappear deeper into the wilderness. Yet something about her plight stirred long dormant feelings of justice within him. For 3 days, the blizzard raged outside while Abigail drifted between consciousness and fevered sleep inside the cabin. Beau hunted when the weather permitted, melted snow for water, and tended to her with an attentiveness that surprised even himself. He found himself talking to her during her lucid moments, more words than he'd spoken to another human in months. On the 4th morning, Beau awoke to find Abigail sitting upright, wrapped in his blankets, staring at him from across the cabin. "I know who you are," she said simply. Beau's hand instinctively moved toward his holster. "You're the Reaper," she continued, seemingly unafraid. "I saw the wanted poster in my father's study." "And yet you don't seem afraid," Beau replied cautiously. "Should I be? You saved my life. Most folks wouldn't consider that enough to outweigh the rest." Abigail studied him with those sage green eyes. "My father always said to judge a man by his actions toward you, not his reputation with others. Your father sounds like he was a wise man." Beau stood and moved to stoke the fire, uncomfortable with her direct gaze, but also naive. Reputations exist for a reason. "Is it true? What they say you did?" Beau's shoulders tensed. "Some of it." "Which parts?" He turned to face her, his expression hard. "The parts that matter." To his surprise, Abigail nodded, accepting his non-answer. "I owe you my life, Mr. Quincy. Whatever you've done before to me, you're the man who found me when all hope was lost." Her simple statement, delivered without judgment, unsettled him more than any accusation could have. Beau had grown accustomed to being feared, hated, hunted, but gratitude and acceptance were foreign currencies he had no idea how to spend. "You need to eat," he said gruffly, changing the subject. "Got some rabbit stew left from last night." As Abigail's strength returned over the next few days, so did her spirit. She moved around the cabin with increasing confidence, helping with small tasks despite Beau's insistence that she rest. Their conversations grew longer, ranging from mundane subjects to deeper matters. Beau found himself sharing stories he hadn't told another soul, while carefully avoiding the darker chapters of his life. "How did you become what you are?" Abigail asked one evening as they sat before the fire, the blizzard having finally relented to a gentle snowfall outside. Beau remained silent for so long that Abigail thought he wouldn't answer. "War changes a man," he finally said, his gaze fixed on the dancing flames. "I came back from fighting to find my brother dead, hanged by cattle rustlers. The law did nothing. I tracked down every last one of them. And after that, I discovered I had a talent for hunting men, became a bounty hunter. Worked for the law at first." His voice grew distant. "Until a wealthy rancher's son killed a young woman. Judge was paid off. The boy walked free. I made sure he faced justice anyway." "You killed him," Abigail stated, not asked. "I did what the law wouldn't." Beau's tone was unapologetic. "His father put the first bounty on my head, others followed. Been running ever since." Abigail was quiet for a moment. "Do you regret it?" Beau looked at her then, his blue eyes reflecting the firelight. I regret the necessity of it, not the act itself. Their gazes held, something unspoken passing between them. In that moment, Beau realized how dangerous this situation had become, not because Abigail might betray him to the authorities, but because she was beginning to matter to him. The weather cleared enough the following day for Beau to venture to his lookout point. The valley below showed no signs of pursuit or travelers of any kind. The recent blizzard had effectively cut them off from civilization. They had time, but not indefinitely. Sooner or later, Hargrove's men would come searching for Abigail, or bounty hunters would pick up Beau's trail again. When he returned to the cabin, he found Abigail had prepared a simple meal from their meager supplies. She'd also cleaned the cabin and mended a tear in his spare shirt. The domestic scene hit him like a physical blow, reminding him of a life he'd never have. "We need to discuss what happens next," Beau said after they'd eaten. "Storm's past, trails will be clearing soon." "You want me to leave," Abigail said quietly. "It's not about what I want, it's about what's necessary for your survival and mine." "Where would I go?" "Hargrove controls everything within 100 miles. There's no place safe for me." "Galesburg," Beau suggested. "It's a small settlement about 60 miles east of here, just across the border in Montana Territory. I know the sheriff there. Man named Marshall. He's honest, can't be bought." "He'd protect you." Abigail's eyes widened. "Montana, that's so far. Far is good. Far means safe. And you?" she asked, her voice catching slightly. "Would you take me there?" The question hung in the air between them. Taking her to Galesburg meant risking exposure, possibly arrest or death. The smart play was to give her supplies, directions, and send her on her way alone. "Yes," he said, surprising himself. "I'll take you. But once you're safe with Marshall, we part ways." "Understood," Abigail nodded, though her eyes held a sadness that tugged at something long buried in Beau's chest. They set out at dawn 2 days later, Beau's horse carrying both of them, plus minimal supplies. The journey would be arduous, the snow still deep in places, the temperature well below freezing, and the constant threat of Hargrove's men or bounty hunters looming over them. Abigail sat in front of Beau, her back pressed against his chest for warmth and stability. Her scent somehow still sweet, despite the harsh conditions, mingled with the crisp winter air, creating a distraction Beau couldn't afford. They traveled in silence for the first few hours, the only sounds the crunch of snow beneath the horses' hooves and their combined breath fogging the air. As the sun climbed higher, Beau felt Abigail gradually relax against him. "How did you learn to survive out here?" she asked, breaking the silence. "Necessity," he replied. "And a Shoshone man who took pity on a foolish white boy who nearly died his first winter in the high country." "You lived with the Shoshone for a time, after the war, before I became a bounty hunter. Old medicine man named Silent Hawk taught me their ways, saved my life more times than I can count." Abigail turned slightly to look up at him. "You're full of surprises, Mr. Quincy." "Beau," he corrected. "If we're riding together for days, might as well use my given name." She smiled. "Beau, then. And I'm Abigail." The sound of his name on her lips sent an unexpected warmth through him, dangerous as a bullet. Beau reminded himself that attachment was a luxury he couldn't afford, not with his past, not with his future, and certainly not with a woman who deserved far better than a life on the run with a wanted man. By nightfall, they'd covered nearly 20 miles despite the difficult terrain. Beau found a sheltered overhang to make camp, building a small fire that would provide warmth without being visible from a distance. They shared a modest meal of jerky and hardtack, huddled close to the flames. "Tell me about your home," Beau said, surprising both of them with his interest. "Before Hargrove came." Abigail's face softened with memory. "It wasn't much compared to some. Just a small ranch my father built after my mother died. We had good water, decent grazing land, a little garden. Father raised horses, had a way with them like I've never seen in another person. Sounds peaceful. It was, until the railroad decided to put a spur line through the valley. Suddenly, our worthless land became valuable. Hargrove started buying up everything he could. Her voice hardened. When buying didn't work, he tried threatening. When threatening didn't work. "I'm sorry about your father," Beau said quietly. "He died protecting what was his, what was ours." Abigail blinked back tears. "I keep thinking I should have done something more. There was nothing you could have done against men like that." "Is that why you became what you did?" "Because there are men like Hargrove who take whatever they want." Beau stared into the fire. "Partly. Worlds full of men who believe power gives them the right to destroy lives. Someone has to stand against them, even if it costs you everything. Sometimes the price is worth paying." He looked at her then, his expression solemn. "Your father understood that." Abigail reached out, her hand covering his. The simple touch sent a jolt through Beau, and he had to resist the urge to pull away. Her hand was warm now, a far cry from the nearly frozen fingers he'd found in the snow. "Thank you," she whispered, "for understanding him, for saving me." Beau nodded, not trusting himself to speak. They remained that way for several heartbeats before he gently withdrew his hand, making a show of checking his weapons for the night watch. "Get some sleep," he said gruffly. "We've got a long ride tomorrow." Abigail settled into the bedroll he'd provided for her, watching him through the firelight. "What about you?" "I'll keep watch. Sleep light out here." "You can't stay awake forever, Beau. Done it before. I'll be fine." Abigail looked like she wanted to argue, but instead pulled the blanket tighter around her shoulders. "Good night, then." "Night, Abigail." Beau watched as she drifted off to sleep, her features softening, making her look even younger. The protectiveness he felt surprised him with its intensity. It had been years since he'd allowed himself to care about another person's welfare beyond the most basic human decency. Yet here he was, risking his freedom, his life for a woman he'd known less than a week. The night passed without incident, though Beau did eventually allow himself a few hours of fitful sleep near dawn, his hand never straying far from his revolver. They broke camp early, pushing onward through increasingly rugged terrain. By midday, Beau's instincts were screaming. Something felt wrong. The birds had gone silent, and the wind carried the faint smell of wood smoke too much for a simple traveler's campfire. "We're changing course," he announced, veering the horse sharply westward. "What is it?" Abigail asked, sensing his tension. "Not sure yet." "Could be nothing. Could be trouble." He urged the horse into a faster pace. Either way, rather not find out directly. They rode hard for an hour, cutting through a dense pine forest that would mask their tracks. Beau only slowed when they reached a fast-moving stream. "We'll follow the water for a while," he explained. "Harder to track that way." Abigail nodded, trusting his judgment without question. That trust was yet another weight on Beau's conscience. He'd spent years being the man no one should trust, and yet this woman had placed her life in his hands without hesitation. As dusk approached, they came upon an abandoned trapper's cabin tucked away in a small clearing. Beau approached cautiously, gun drawn, but found the place long deserted. "It's not much, but it'll keep us warm tonight," he said, helping Abigail dismount. Her legs buckled slightly from the long ride, and he caught her, his hands lingering at her waist longer than necessary. "Thank you," she murmured, looking up at him with those captivating eyes. Beau cleared his throat and stepped away. Best get inside before dark. The cabin was dusty but intact, a single room with a stone hearth, crude table, and frame for a bed, though the mattress was long gone. Beau set about making the place habitable while Abigail gathered kindling for a fire. As night fell and the temperature dropped, they huddled near the freshly lit fire, sharing the last of their provisions. "Tomorrow we'll need to hunt," Beau said. "Supplies are running low." "I can help," Abigail offered. "Father taught me to shoot, though I was never very good." "No need." "I can manage. You should rest." Abigail frowned. "I'm not helpless, you know. I've been recovering for days now." "Never said you were helpless, just that you should rest." "While you do everything," she shook her head. "That's not fair to you. We're in this together now." The phrase "together" hung in the air, carrying implications neither of them was ready to acknowledge. Beau stood abruptly and moved to check the perimeter of the cabin. "We'll see about hunting tomorrow," he said over his shoulder. "For now, we both need sleep." Beau arranged their bedrolls on opposite sides of the fire, maintaining a proper distance between them. Yet as the night deepened and the temperature plummeted further, he heard Abigail's teeth chattering despite the fire. "You're freezing," he observed, sitting up. "I'm fine," she insisted, though her shivering belied her words. Beau sighed, wrestling with himself for only a moment before making a decision. He moved his bedroll beside hers. "Body heat," he explained gruffly. "Practical necessity, nothing more." Abigail nodded, wordlessly making room for him beside her. Beau lay down stiffly, awkward in a way he hadn't been since adolescence. Slowly, hesitantly, he placed an arm around her, pulling her against his chest. She fit against him perfectly, as though created to occupy that space. "Better?" he asked, his voice rougher than intended. "Yes," she whispered, relaxing into his embrace. "Thank you." Within minutes, her breathing evened out as she succumbed to exhaustion. Beau, however, remained wide awake, acutely aware of every point where their bodies connected. The intimacy, innocent as it was, stirred feelings he'd thought long dead. He told himself it was merely physical response, natural, meaningless. He was a man, after all, and she a beautiful woman. But deep down, Beau recognized the danger went far beyond the physical. Abigail Rosewood, with her courage and her faith in him despite knowing his reputation, was threatening the walls he'd built around his heart over 8 lonely years. Morning came with a soft, steady snowfall. Beau woke to find Abigail still nestled against him, her hand resting over his heart. For a brief moment, he allowed himself to imagine a different life, one where he might wake this way every morning, without the shadow of his past hanging over them. The fantasy dissolved as reality reasserted itself. He gently extricated himself from her embrace, moving to check outside before she awoke. The new snow was both blessing and curse. It would cover their tracks, but also make travel more difficult. Beau returned to find Abigail awake, folding the bedrolls with an efficiency that spoke of a lifetime of practical skills despite her delicate appearance. "More snow," he announced. "We'll need to stay another day, hunt for provisions." Abigail nodded, seemingly untroubled by the delay. "I saw some snare wire in the corner. I can set traps while you hunt larger game." Beau raised an eyebrow. "You know how to set snares?" Father believed in self-sufficiency, said a person should know how to feed themselves by any means necessary. A sad smile crossed her face. "Never thought I'd need those skills quite like this." "He sounds like he was a good man. Prepared you well." "He was." Abigail's eyes misted briefly before she blinked away the emotion. "So shall we divide the labor? You hunt, I'll trap, and we can both gather firewood." Beau found himself agreeing to her plan, impressed by her practical approach. They spent the morning working separately, Beau tracking a deer through the fresh snow while Abigail set snares for rabbits and gathered what edible plants she could find beneath the snow cover. By midday, Beau had brought down a young buck, field-dressed it, and packed the meat for transport back to the cabin. He found Abigail nearby, checking her snares, a small but triumphant smile on her face as she held up 2 rabbits. "Not bad for a first attempt in years," she said proudly. "Not bad at all," Beau agreed, surprised by the genuine admiration he felt. They returned to the cabin together, working side by side to prepare their bounty. Beau was struck by the easy rhythm they fell into, Abigail skinning the rabbits while he butchered portions of the deer, neither needing to speak much to coordinate their efforts. "We make a good team," Abigail observed as they hung strips of meat to smoke over the fire. "We do," Beau admitted. "You're not what I expected, Abigail Rosewood. What did you expect? A helpless, weeping damsel, honestly?" "Yes." His candor surprised them both. "Most women I've encountered would have fallen apart after what you've been through." Abigail's hands stilled their work. "I've done my share of weeping, but tears won't bring my father back or keep me alive." She looked up at him, her gaze direct. "Besides, I was raised to believe that God doesn't give us burdens we can't carry." "You still believe in God, after everything?" "More than ever." Her conviction was unwavering. "Do you?" Beau turned away, focusing intently on the meat he was preparing. "Lost track of him somewhere between the war and becoming a man who kills for money." "Is that all you see yourself as, a killer?" "It's what I am." Abigail moved closer, forcing him to meet her eyes. "It's part of what you are, but not the whole. I've seen the rest, the man who saved a stranger in a blizzard, who's risking his life to take her to safety, who hunts to provide food rather than taking pleasure in the killing." Her words penetrated deeper than Beau wanted to admit. For years, he'd defined himself by his notorious reputation, accepting the role society had cast him in. Abigail saw beyond that, recognizing complexities he himself had forgotten existed. "You see what you want to see," he said finally. "I see what's there," she countered. "The question is, why can't you?" The question lingered between them as they finished their work. By evening, the cabin was filled with the rich aroma of roasting meat, and they had enough provisions to last several days. As they ate their meal, Beau found himself sharing stories from his past, tales of his childhood in Missouri, his time with the Shoshone, even humorous misadventures from his early days as a bounty hunter. Abigail listened intently, laughing at his jokes and asking thoughtful questions that revealed her sharp intelligence. In turn, she told him about growing up with her scholarly father who'd moved west after her mother's death from influenza, determined to build a new life for his daughter. She spoke of her love of books, her fascination with the natural world, and her dreams of someday becoming a teacher. "Hard to imagine you living such a sedate life," Beau commented. "After seeing how well you handle yourself out here. Who says teaching is sedate?" Abigail challenged with a smile. "Have you ever tried managing 20 children determined to do anything but learn their letters?" "Fair point," Beau chuckled. "Still, seems a waste of your other talents. Perhaps I'll find a place where I can use all my skills." "A frontier town that needs both education and practical knowledge." Her expression grew wistful. "If such a place would have me." "Any place would be lucky to have you," Beau said with unexpected fervor. Their eyes met across the fire, the air between them charged with unspoken feelings. Beau was the first to look away, busying himself with cleaning his hunting knife. "We should rest," he said, his voice deliberately casual. "Weather permitting, we'll make for Galesburg tomorrow." That night, they again shared body heat for warmth, though Beau maintained a more careful distance between them. Still, as Abigail drifted to sleep, her hand found his beneath the blanket, fingers intertwining as naturally as breathing. Beau lay awake long into the night, watching the play of firelight across her peaceful features, knowing with increasing certainty that delivering her safely to Galesburg would be both the most honorable and most difficult act of his life. Dawn broke clear and cold, the storm having passed during the night. They packed quickly, loading their newly acquired provisions and erasing signs of their presence from the cabin. Beau helped Abigail onto the horse before mounting behind her, trying to ignore how right it felt to have her in his arms again. Their third day of travel passed without incident, the landscape gradually changing as they descended from the high country toward the rolling hills that marked the approach to Montana Territory. Beau remained vigilant, scanning their surroundings constantly for signs of pursuit or ambush, but the wilderness remained peaceful around them. They made camp that night in a protected ravine, their fire small and well shielded. As they sat side by side beneath a canopy of stars, Abigail broke the comfortable silence. How much further to Galesburg? 2 days, maybe 3 if the weather turns. Beau poked at the fire with a stick. We're making good time. Abigail nodded, her expression thoughtful. And then what happens? I told you. I get you safely to Sheriff Marshall and then we part ways. Is that really what you want? The directness of her question caught him off guard. What I want doesn't matter. It's what needs to happen. That's not an answer, Beau. He sighed, running a hand through his hair. No, it's not what I want, but wanting things we can't have is a fool's game, and I stopped being a fool a long time ago. Why can't you have it? She pressed, turning to face him fully. You know why. I'm a wanted man with a price on my head in 3 territories. Every lawman and bounty hunter from here to Texas would love to bring me in dead or alive. His voice grew harder. And that's assuming your friend Hargrove doesn't find you first and kill us both. So we go somewhere else. Somewhere no one knows you, Beau laughed bitterly. There is no such place, not in this country. Then we leave this country, go to Canada or Mexico or even across the ocean. We, Beau caught the word immediately. There is no we, Abigail, there can't be. Why not? Her voice was steady, though her eyes betrayed her hurt. Because you deserve better than a life on the run with a killer. The words burst from him with more emotion than he'd intended. You deserve a home, safety, children, respectability, all the things I can never give you. Shouldn't I be the one to decide what I deserve? Abigail reached for his hand. What I want. And what is it you want? You, she said simply. I want you, Beau Quincy, with all your flaws and your virtues, the man who found me in the snow and saved my life in more ways than one. The rawness of her confession left him speechless. Beau had faced down armed men without flinching, yet this slip of a woman and her honest declaration terrified him more than any gunfight. You don't know me, he finally managed. Not really. I know enough. She moved closer, her hand coming up to rest against his cheek. I know your heart, even if you've forgotten it yourself. The touch of her hand against his face broke something loose inside him. Beau leaned forward, pressing his lips to hers in a kiss that began tentatively, but quickly deepened with the force of feelings too long denied. Abigail responded with equal passion, her fingers threading through his hair as she pressed herself against him. When they finally broke apart, both breathing heavily, Beau rested his forehead against hers. This is madness, he whispered. Perhaps, she agreed, her voice breathless, but it's the kind of madness that makes life worth living. Beau wanted desperately to believe her, to surrender to the future she was offering. But the protective instinct that had driven him to save her in the first place now compelled him to save her from himself. We should sleep, he said, pulling back slightly. Long day tomorrow. Disappointment flashed in Abigail's eyes, but she nodded, respecting his unspoken request for time. That night, as they lay together beneath the stars, the physical space between them belied the emotional distance that had vanished with their kiss. Morning brought a new tension between them, not unpleasant, but charged with possibility and uncertainty. They rode in silence for much of the day, each lost in their own thoughts as the miles passed beneath their horses' hooves. By mid-afternoon, they crested a ridge that offered a panoramic view of the valley below. In the far distance, barely visible, lay what appeared to be a small settlement. "Is that Galesburg?" Abigail asked, squinting against the sunlight. "No, that's Whitefish Creek." "Smaller place, about a day's ride from Galesburg." Beau frowned. "We'll need to be careful. Small towns talk." They decided to skirt the settlement, taking a longer route that would keep them hidden in the foothills. As they descended into more populated country, Beau grew increasingly vigilant, his hand never straying far from his weapon. Near sunset, they encountered their first sign of other humans, a weathered sign warning travelers about claim jumpers in the area. The frontier justice implied in the crudely painted message was a stark reminder of the world they were re-entering. "We'll camp here tonight," Beau decided, guiding them to a secluded spot near a small stream. Best not to approach civilization in the dark. As they made their modest camp, Beau noticed Abigail watching him with an expression he couldn't quite decipher. "What?" he asked, self-conscious under her scrutiny. "I was just thinking how different you look now compared to when I first woke up in your cabin." She smiled softly. "Less forbidding. Don't let appearances fool you. I'm still the same man. Are you? I'm not so sure." She moved closer, helping him arrange kindling for the fire. "The man I first met wouldn't have kissed me last night." Heat rose to Beau's face. "About that." "I shouldn't have." "Don't you dare apologize," Abigail interrupted, her voice firm. "Unless you regret it, which is an entirely different matter." "I don't regret it," he admitted after a moment, "but that doesn't make it right." "Why not?" "What's wrong about two people finding comfort in each other, finding something worth fighting for?" "Because I have nothing to offer you but danger and hardship." Frustration colored his tone. "You're still young, Abigail, 20 years old with your whole life ahead of you." "I'm 32 with nothing to my name but a price on my head and a reputation that would see you shunned in any decent society." "I don't care about decent society. I care about you." Her expression softened. "And I'm not asking you for promises or forever. I'm just asking you not to give up before we've even had a chance." Beau stared at her, torn between the selfish desire to claim the happiness she offered and the selfless need to ensure her future security. "One day at a time," he finally conceded. "We get you safely to Galesburg and then we'll see." It wasn't the declaration Abigail had hoped for, but the compromise brought a smile to her face nonetheless. "One day at a time," she agreed. That night, when they settled down to sleep, Beau held her closer than before, allowing himself to savor the warmth of her in his arms, the scent of her hair, the steady rhythm of her heartbeat against his chest. If these moments were all they would ever have, he was determined to commit every detail to memory. Dawn was just breaking when Beau jerked awake, his hand automatically reaching for his revolver. Something had disturbed his sleep, a sound out of place in the natural chorus of morning birds and rustling leaves. "What is it?" Abigail whispered, instantly alert beside him. "Not sure. Stay here." Beau moved silently to the edge of their camp, scanning the surrounding area with the heightened senses of a man accustomed to danger. The crack of a twig breaking confirmed his suspicions. They were not alone. "Whoever you are," Beau called out, gun raised, "show yourself. Slow and easy." There was a moment of tense silence before a figure emerged from the trees, a man in his 40s, trail worn but well armed, with a star pinned to his vest. Well, if it ain't the famous Reaper himself," the man drawled, his own weapon drawn but pointed at the ground. "Heard you might be in these parts. Who are you?" Beau demanded, not lowering his gun. "Name's Dawson, deputy out of Whitefish Creek." The man's eyes shifted to Abigail, who had risen to stand slightly behind Beau. "That the Rosewood girl. Victor Hargrove's offering a mighty fine reward for her safe return." "She's not going back to Hargrove," Beau stated flatly. "Figured as much." Dawson sighed, seemingly unconcerned by the weapon trained on him. "Look, Quincy, I ain't here for a shootout. Just passing along some information you might find useful." "What information?" "Hargrove's men are swarming these hills. At least 6 of them spotted in Whitefish Creek yesterday, asking questions. Showing your picture, too." He nodded toward Abigail. "And hers." Beau's mind raced, calculating possibilities. "Why tell us this? What's your angle?" Dawson shrugged. "Let's just say I got no love for Hargrove or his methods. Man's been buying up badges all across the territory. Figure anybody he wants that bad is probably worth helping instead." "You expect me to believe a lawman is willing to let a wanted criminal go free out of the goodness of his heart? Believe what you want. But Hargrove's men are heading this way, following your trail. You've got maybe 2 hours before they find you." Dawson holstered his weapon slowly. "There's an old mining trail about a mile east of here. Follows the river up into the high country, comes out just north of Galesburg. Most folks don't know about it anymore." Beau studied the deputy's face, looking for signs of deception. "Why Galesburg?" "Sheriff Marshall's an old friend. Man of principle. Won't be bought, not by Hargrove, not by anyone." Dawson backed away slowly. "Make your choice, Quincy, but make it fast." With that, the deputy disappeared back into the trees, leaving Beau and Abigail alone with the warning that might save or doom them. "Do you trust him?" Abigail asked softly. "Not entirely, but his information rings true." Beau began gathering their few belongings with urgent efficiency. "Either way, we can't stay here." Within minutes, they had erased all signs of their camp and mounted up, heading east toward the mining trail Dawson had mentioned. Beau remained hyper-vigilant, expecting an ambush at every turn, but the forest around them remained peaceful as they located the overgrown path that wound alongside a swift-flowing river. The trail was treacherous in places, forcing them to dismount and lead the horse across narrow passages where one misstep could send them plunging into the icy waters below. Progress was slower than Beau would have liked, but the difficult terrain would also make them harder to track. "You think we've lost them?" Abigail asked as they paused to rest near midday. "For now, maybe." Beau scanned the cliffs above them. "But Hargrove's not the type to give up easily, not when his pride's at stake." "It's more than pride," Abigail said grimly. "My father discovered something about Hargrove's business dealings, evidence of fraud in his land acquisitions. That's the real reason he had my father killed." Beau looked at her sharply. "You never mentioned this before." "I wasn't sure I could trust you," she admitted. "Not at first. And then later. It didn't seem important compared to surviving." "This evidence, do you have it?" Abigail's hand went to the silver locket around her neck. "Father put the documents on microfilm. It's in here." She opened the locket to reveal a tiny square of film hidden behind what appeared to be a simple family portrait. "He said if anything happened to him, I should take it to the federal marshal in Helena." Beau stared at the innocuous-looking piece of film, understanding now why Hargrove was so determined to find her. "That changes things." "How so?" "Hargrove won't stop. Not ever." He closed the locket gently. "But it also means we have leverage. Something that might keep you safe even after we reach Galesburg." They continued their journey with renewed urgency, the knowledge of what Abigail carried lending weight to every decision. The mining trail grew steeper, winding up into mountains that separated them from the relative safety of Galesburg. As dusk approached, bringing with it a bone-deep chill, Beau located a small cave set back from the trail defensible, with a clear view of the approach. They settled in for the night, keeping their fire small and well shielded from outside view. "One more day," Beau said as they huddled together for warmth. "If we push hard, we can reach Galesburg by tomorrow evening." Abigail nodded, her expression a mixture of relief and sorrow. "And then we part ways." "I didn't say that." Beau's voice was soft in the darkness. "But you're still planning it. I can see it in your eyes every time you look at me." He couldn't deny it. Despite their growing feelings for each other, Beau still believed Abigail would be better off without him. The evidence she carried only reinforced that belief. She needed the protection of the law now, not a wanted outlaw. "I want what's best for you," he said finally. "And you don't think that could be you?" Abigail's question hung in the air between them. Before Beau could respond, a faint sound reached his ears, the distant crack of a rifle shot echoing through the mountains. "They've found our trail," he said, immediately on alert. "We need to move. Now." Despite the darkness, they packed quickly and set out, relying on Beau's experience and the faint light of a quarter moon to guide them along the treacherous path. Traveling at night was dangerous under the best circumstances. On a narrow mining trail with sheer drops on one side, it was nearly suicidal. But staying put was a death sentence of a different kind. Hargrove's men would be combing the mountains by dawn, and their cave, while defensible, would become a trap. They rode in tense silence, the horse picking its way carefully along the trail. Abigail clung to Beau, her body taut with fear, not for herself but for him. She knew what capture would mean for her, perhaps ransom or forced marriage to secure her silence. For Beau, certain death. As the eastern sky began to lighten with the first hint of dawn, they reached a plateau that offered a clear view of the valley below. In the far distance, perhaps 15 miles away, lay a small settlement that Beau identified as Galesburg. "We'll rest here briefly," he decided, helping Abigail dismount. "Horse needs it, and so do you." They shared the last of their food, a few strips of dried venison and a handful of berries Abigail had gathered the previous day. As they ate, Beau outlined his plan. "There's a back road into town from this direction, less traveled, less likely to be watched. We'll approach after dark, find Marshall directly rather than going through town. And if Hargrove's men are already there, then we adapt." Beau's tone was matter of fact. "I've gotten out of worse situations." Abigail studied his face in the growing light. "You're not telling me everything." Beau sighed, knowing he couldn't hide his concerns from her perceptive gaze. "Dawson knew too much about us, about our direction. Either he's genuinely trying to help or he's working with Hargrove and set a trap," Abigail finished. "Exactly. Which means we need to be prepared for anything when we reach Galesburg." "What about the federal marshal in Helena?" "Too far. At least 4 days hard ride from here. We'd never make it with Hargrove's men on our trail." Beau checked his weapons methodically. "Marshall is our best hope. If he's the man Dawson claims, he'll help get you and the evidence to Helena safely." "And you?" Beau met her gaze steadily. "One problem at a time." They resumed their journey as the sun cleared the eastern mountains, casting long shadows across the trail. The descent into the valley was easier than the previous day's climb, but Beau maintained a cautious pace, stopping frequently to check for signs of pursuit. By mid-afternoon, they had reached the lower foothills, where the mining trail intersected with a seldom-used wagon road. Beau's tension was palpable as they ventured onto more open ground, the protection of the mountains now behind them. "We'll follow the tree line," he decided, guiding the horse along the edge of a sparse forest that bordered the road. "More cover that way." They had traveled perhaps 2 miles when Beau suddenly reined in, his body going rigid with alertness. Abigail followed his gaze to a plume of dust rising from the road ahead, riders moving fast in their direction. "Back into the trees," Beau ordered, turning the horse sharply. "Now." They retreated into the forest just as 5 mounted men rounded the bend in the road. From their concealed position, Beau and Abigail watched as the group slowed, examining the ground for tracks. "Hargrove's men," Abigail whispered. Beau nodded grimly. "The two on the left are professional trackers. Worked with them once, years back. They're good, very good." As if to confirm his assessment, one of the men pointed toward the forest edge where they had just been. The group immediately changed direction, heading straight for their hiding place. "Run," Beau said quietly, helping Abigail dismount. "Stay low, move fast, don't look back." "I'm not leaving you," she protested. "Yes, you are." His tone brooked no argument. "Head north through the trees. There's a creek about half a mile that way. Follow it downstream toward Galesburg." "I'll catch up." "Beau, Abigail." He cupped her face in his hands. "Trust me, please." The desperation in his eyes silenced her objections. Abigail nodded once, pressed a quick, fierce kiss to his lips, then disappeared into the underbrush. Beau watched her go before turning back to the approaching riders. They were close now, close enough that running would only get him shot in the back. Instead, he mounted the horse and rode boldly out of the trees, directly into their path. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he called, his posture relaxed despite the hand resting on his holstered revolver. "Looking for someone?" The riders pulled up short, weapons instantly drawn. The leader, a hard-faced man with a scar running from temple to jaw, gave a cold smile. "Quincy. Thought that might be your trail we were following." His eyes scanned the area behind Beau. "Where's the girl?" "What girl?" Beau asked innocently. The scarred man spat. "Don't play dumb. Hargrove wants the Rosewood girl. Hand her over and maybe, just maybe, we let you ride away." "Generous offer. But I'm afraid I can't help you." "Can't or won't?" The man's smile widened unpleasantly. "Doesn't matter. We'll find her either way after we deal with you." Beau assessed the situation with the cold calculation of experience. 5 against 1, bad odds by any measure, but he'd faced worse. And he only needed to buy Abigail enough time to reach the creek, where her tracks would be harder to follow. "Well now," Beau drawled, "that presents a problem, because I'm not inclined to be dealt with today." What happened next occurred with the blinding speed that had earned Beau his notorious reputation. His hand moved in a blur, drawing and firing in one smooth motion. The scarred leader was dead before he could pull his own trigger, a bullet hole neatly centered in his forehead. Beau threw himself from the saddle as the remaining 4 men opened fire, hitting the ground and rolling beneath his spooked horse for cover. 2 more shots from his position in the dirt found their marks, one man clutching his chest as he toppled from his mount, another howling in pain as a bullet shattered his knee. The remaining 2 riders scattered, seeking cover in the trees. Beau used the moment to scramble behind a large boulder, narrowly avoiding the barrage of bullets that followed him. "You're dead, Quincy," one of the men shouted. "No way out this time." Beau didn't waste breath responding. He had 3 bullets left and 2 opponents still standing, one wounded but dangerous, the other completely unharmed. Not ideal, but workable. For several tense minutes, the forest fell silent except for the pained moaning of the wounded man. Beau remained motionless behind his cover, listening intently for any sound that might betray his opponent's positions. A twig snapped to his right, deliberate, he thought. A distraction. Beau didn't fall for it, instead focusing his attention to the left, where the real attack would come. Sure enough, a shadow moved among the trees to his left, attempting to flank his position. Beau waited until the man was committed to his approach before rising just enough to take a clean shot. The bullet found its mark, and another of Hargrove's men fell. One left the wounded one. Dangerous, because wounded men had nothing to lose. "It's just you and me now," Beau called out. "You can still ride away from this." "So can you," came the reply, closer than Beau expected. "Just tell me where the girl went. That's all Hargrove wants. Not going to happen." "Then we both die here." The final confrontation came with startling suddenness. The wounded man charged Beau's position with reckless abandon, firing wildly as he limped forward. Beau rose to meet the attack, his last 2 bullets finding their target with deadly accuracy. As the echo of gunfire faded, Beau stood among the carnage he'd created, his expression grim. 5 men dead or dying necessary, but no cause for satisfaction. He quickly gathered weapons and ammunition from the fallen, checked his own wound, a graze along his left side that bled freely, but wasn't serious, and retrieved his nervous horse. Time was critical now. The gunfight would have been heard for miles, possibly alerting other search parties to their location. Beau needed to find Abigail and get her to Galesburg before nightfall. Following her trail was easy for a man of his tracking skills. She had moved exactly as he'd instructed, north through the trees until she reached the creek, then downstream toward town. Beau pushed his tired mount as fast as the terrain allowed, scanning the creek banks for any sign of her. He found her about 3 miles downstream, huddled behind a fallen tree, her face pale with fear that transformed to relief when she recognized him. "I heard gunshots," she said, rushing to him. "I thought I was afraid. I'm all right," he assured her, wincing slightly as she embraced him and pressed against his injured side. Abigail immediately noticed the blood staining his shirt. "You're hurt." "It's nothing, just a graze." He helped her onto the horse. "But we need to move. That fight will bring others." They rode double again, pushing harder now that safety was potentially within reach. As the sun began its descent toward the western horizon, the first scattered buildings of Galesburg came into view. Beau approached cautiously, circling wide to enter from the north side of town where fewer eyes would notice their arrival. The settlement was smaller than he'd expected, a single main street lined with the usual frontier establishments: general store, saloon, livery stable, and a modest church at the far end. A 2-story building with "Sheriff" painted on a wooden sign stood near the center of town. "Wait here," Beau instructed, helping Abigail dismount in the shadow of an abandoned barn at the town's edge. "I'll make sure it's safe before we go in." "Be careful," she urged, her eyes reflecting both fear and faith. Beau nodded, checking his weapons one last time before slipping away toward the sheriff's office. He moved with the stealth of a man accustomed to avoiding notice, keeping to shadows and alleyways as he assessed the town. Galesburg seemed quiet, too quiet for Beau's liking. The saloon was doing steady business, but the streets were nearly deserted despite the early evening hour. At the hitching post outside the sheriff's office stood 3 unfamiliar horses, their gear suggesting hard riding. Suspicion blossomed into certainty as Beau edged close enough to peer through the office window. Inside, a broad-shouldered man with a sheriff's badge marshal presumably sat at his desk, facing 2 men whose backs were to the window. Their posture was tense, confrontational. Beau couldn't hear the conversation, but the body language told him everything he needed to know. Hargrove's influence had reached Galesburg ahead of them. Whether Marshall was compromised or simply outnumbered remained to be seen, but either way, the office was not the sanctuary they had hoped for. Returning to Abigail, Beau quickly outlined what he'd observed. "We need a new plan," he concluded. "Can't risk the sheriff's office, not until we know where Marshall stands." "What about the church?" Abigail suggested. Surely a minister would offer sanctuary, at least temporarily. Beau considered the idea. A church was both the last place anyone would look for him and a location where even Hargrove's men might hesitate to start trouble. Worth a try, he agreed. But we'll need to be careful. No telling who's watching. They waited until full dark before making their move. With most of the town's activity centered around the saloon, they were able to make their way to the small white church without being spotted. The building was dark, but a faint light shone from a modest house behind it, the minister's residence, Beau assumed. Abigail knocked softly on the door, which was opened moments later by a middle-aged man with kind eyes and a wary expression. "Can I help you?" he asked, taking in their trail-worn appearance with concern. "We need sanctuary," Abigail said simply. "Please." The minister hesitated only briefly before stepping aside. "Come in, quickly." Inside the small but comfortable home, they were introduced to Reverend Thomas Parker and his wife, Martha. The couple listened with growing alarm as Abigail explained their situation, omitting only the details of Beau's notorious identity. Victor Hargrove's reputation precedes him, even here in Galesburg, Reverend Parker said grimly when she'd finished. "He's been buying up property throughout the region. Many good people have been forced out." "What about Sheriff Marshall?" Beau asked. "Can he be trusted?" The Reverend and his wife exchanged a look. "Jacob Marshall is a good man," Martha said carefully, "but he's under tremendous pressure. Hargrove's men arrived 2 days ago making threats, offering bribes. Has he taken their money?" The question was blunt but necessary. "No," Reverend Parker replied firmly, "but he's alone with only one deputy against Hargrove's small army. He's been cautious." "We need to get to the federal marshal in Helena," Abigail explained, touching her locket. "I have evidence of Hargrove's crimes." The Reverend nodded thoughtfully. "There's a stage to Helena day after tomorrow, but you'd never make it Hargrove's men are watching all routes out of town." "What about Sheriff Marshall?" Beau pressed. "Could he help escort us?" "Perhaps, but approaching him directly is risky. Hargrove's men watch the office." Martha, who had been quiet during much of the conversation, suddenly spoke up. "The Founders' Day celebration is tomorrow. Everyone in town will be at the square, including the sheriff. You might be able to speak with him privately then." It was a plan, if not an ideal one. The Parkers offered them shelter for the night, a small guest room with a single bed that the couple diplomatically suggested Beau and Abigail could share if they were married folks, or Martha could make up a pallet in the sitting room if they weren't. Beau immediately volunteered for the pallet. Conscious of propriety, despite the intimacy he and Abigail had already shared on the trail. The knowing look Martha gave them suggested she saw more than they were saying, but she made no comment as she prepared the simple bedding. Later, after their hosts had retired, Abigail sought Beau out in the darkened sitting room. She found him awake, staring at the dying embers in the fireplace. "You should be resting," he said softly as she sat beside him on the floor. "I couldn't sleep. Too much on my mind." She leaned against his shoulder. "Are we going to make it, Beau?" Truly, he wanted to lie, to offer comfortable assurances, but Abigail deserved better. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I promise you this: I'll get that evidence to Helena if it's the last thing I do." "That's not what I meant, and you know it." She turned to face him. "I meant us. Are we going to make it?" The question hung between them, laden with all the unspoken hopes and fears of the past week. Beau had been avoiding this reckoning, focusing on immediate survival rather than future possibilities. "Abigail," he began, uncertain how to express the conflict within him. "Don't tell me what you think I want to hear," she interrupted. "Just tell me the truth. What do you want, Beau?" "If all obstacles were removed, if there were no bounties, no Hargrove, what would you want?" The question stripped away his defenses, leaving only the raw truth he'd been avoiding. "You," he said simply. "I'd want you, a life with you. A chance to be the man you seem to think I am instead of the man I've been." Tears welled in Abigail's eyes, catching the faint firelight. "Then that's what we fight for, not just survival but a future, together." She kissed him then, a gesture of promise and hope that Beau returned with equal fervor. For that moment, the dangers waiting outside faded into insignificance compared to the certainty growing between them. When they separated, Beau held her face gently between his calloused hands. "When this is over, when you're safe and Hargrove can't hurt you, I want to do this properly. Court you as you deserve if you'll have me." Abigail smiled through her tears. "I already have you, Beau Quincy. The rest is just details." Morning arrived with the sound of activity in the town square outside preparations for the Founders' Day celebration. Beau and Abigail joined the Parkers for a simple breakfast, during which they refined their plan for contacting Sheriff Marshall. "I'll go to the celebration alone," Reverend Parker decided. "Less suspicious that way. I can speak to Jacob, arrange a private meeting." "What about us?" Abigail asked. "You'll stay here with Martha until I return with word," the Reverend explained. "The celebration runs all-day, games and food in the morning, speeches in the afternoon, dancing in the evening. At some point, I'll find an opportunity to speak with the sheriff privately." It wasn't ideal, but it was the safest approach. Beau spent the morning checking and rechecking his weapons, planning alternate routes out of town, and watching the street through a gap in the curtains. The celebration was drawing a good crowd, including, Beau noted with grim satisfaction, several of Hargrove's men, easily identifiable by their matching gun belts and watchful demeanor. Reverend Parker returned shortly after noon, his expression cautiously optimistic. "Jacob will help," he reported. "He's been looking for a way to stand against Hargrove without getting himself and half the town killed." "He knows who I am?" Beau asked. The Reverend nodded. "He recognized your description immediately, says he's been hearing about the Reaper for years." A small smile crossed his face. "Also says if half the stories are true, you're exactly the ally he needs right now." Relief and wariness warred in Beau's mind. "What's the plan?" "There's a back entrance to the jail through the livery stable. Jacob will meet us there at dusk, when everyone's distracted by the dance. He has a plan to get you both to Helena, says he's been waiting for an opportunity like this." "It could be a trap," Beau pointed out, ever cautious. "It could," the Reverend acknowledged. "But I've known Jacob Marshall for 15 years. He's a man of his word and his principles." The plan set, they settled in to wait for dusk. Martha kept them fed with stew and fresh bread while Reverend Parker tended to his duties at the celebration. Abigail spent much of the afternoon writing a detailed account of her father's discoveries and Hargrove's crimes, to accompany the microfilm evidence. As the sun began its descent, Beau found himself increasingly agitated. Something felt wrong, though he couldn't pinpoint what. Years of survival had taught him to trust these instincts. "We need to move," he announced suddenly. "Now, not at dusk, but the plan," Martha began, "has likely been compromised." Beau was already gathering their few belongings. "Hargrove's men aren't fools. If they've been watching the town for days, they've noticed Reverend Parker's unusual movements today." As if confirming his suspicions, a commotion erupted outside shouts, then the unmistakable sound of gunfire from the direction of the town square. Martha rushed to the window. "Dear God," she gasped. "There's fighting at the celebration." Beau joined her, assessing the situation with a tactical eye. From their vantage point, he could see people fleeing the square as several armed men Hargroves exchanged fire with what appeared to be the sheriff and his deputy. A diversion, Beau realized. They're creating chaos to flush us out or cover their approach. He turned to Abigail. We need to get to the sheriff's office, now while they are occupied. I'm coming with you, Martha declared to their surprise. She opened a cabinet, revealing a shotgun. Thomas will be in the middle of that. I won't sit here and wait. Beau respected her resolve. Stay behind me, both of you. Move fast, stay low. They exited through the back of the house, using outbuildings and alleyways for cover as they made their way toward the sheriff's office. The sounds of gunfire continued from the square, but seemed to be moving the fighting spreading through the town. They were halfway to their destination when Beau spotted two of Hargrove's men approaching the church from the opposite direction looking for them. Undoubtedly. He motioned for the women to take cover behind a water trough while he dealt with the threat. Beau moved with predatory silence, circling behind the men as they entered the now empty minister's residence. When they emerged moments later, angry and alert, he was waiting, looking for someone. Beau asked, his revolver trained on them. Both men went for their weapons, but Beau was faster. 2 shots rang out and both men crumpled to the ground. The noise would attract attention, but there was no helping that now. Keep moving, he ordered, rejoining the women. Quickly. They reached the back of the livery stable that adjoined the sheriff's office just as fresh gunfire erupted nearby. Peering cautiously around the corner, Beau saw Sheriff Marshall and his deputy pinned down behind an overturned wagon, exchanging shots with 3 of Hargrove's men. Stay here, Beau instructed the women. I'll help the sheriff, then come back for you. Be careful, Abigail pleaded, touching his arm. Beau nodded, then slipped away, circling to approach Hargrove's men from behind. The element of surprise gave him the advantage. 2 were down before they knew he was there. The third managing only a wild shot that went wide before Beau's bullet found its mark. The sudden cessation of gunfire brought Sheriff Marshall to his feet, weapon raised until he recognized the figure approaching him. Quincy, he called cautiously. Marshall, Beau acknowledged. Heard you might be willing to help us. The sheriff, a weathered man in his 50s with a reputation as solid as his build, lowered his gun. Parker told me you'd be coming at dusk. Plans changed when your town turned into a battlefield. Beau gestured toward the stable. Got 2 ladies waiting there, Martha Parker and Abigail Rosewood. Marshall nodded to his young deputy. Tim, get them to the office, side door. As the deputy hurried off, Marshall fixed Beau with an assessing stare. You're not what I expected. No, expected someone. I don't know. Colder, maybe, man with your reputation. Reputations can be misleading, Beau said quietly. So I'm beginning to see. The sheriff checked his ammunition. Hargrove's got at least 10 men in town, maybe more. They've been stirring up trouble for days, but this, he gestured to the bodies nearby, this is open warfare. They're desperate to find the girl and whatever evidence she's carrying. Which means they know she's here, Beau concluded grimly. We need to get her to Helena immediately. Agreed. I've got a plan, but it's risky. At this point, Sheriff, risky is all we've got. Inside the relative safety of the sheriff's office, Marshall outlined his strategy. A freight wagon was leaving for Helena at first light, carrying supplies for the territorial government. The driver, a former soldier Marshall trusted implicitly, would conceal Abigail and the evidence beneath the cargo. What about Beau? Abigail asked, her hand finding his. He comes too. Marshall exchanged a look with Beau. That's where it gets complicated. Hargrove's men will be watching all routes out of town. We need a diversion, something big enough to draw them away from the freight wagon. Understanding dawned on Beau. You want me to be the diversion? You're the prize they want almost as much as her, Marshall confirmed. If they see the Reaper making a run for it, they'll follow, every last one of them. Absolutely not, Abigail protested. It's suicide. It's necessary, Beau countered quietly. And I'm good at not getting caught. The argument that followed was brief but intense, with Abigail refusing to consider any plan that separated them. In the end, it was Martha Parker who broke the impasse. "Child," she said gently, "sometimes love means making the hardest choice. He's offering you a future not just for yourself, but for all the people Hargrove has hurt and would hurt still." Abigail's tears flowed freely, but she recognized the truth in the older woman's words. "You have to promise to find me," she told Beau fiercely. "When it's over, when it's safe, you have to promise you'll come for me." "I promise," Beau said, meaning it more than any vow he'd ever made. "Nothing in this world could keep me from finding my way back to you." The plan was set. Abigail would hide with Martha at the livery stable until dawn, then transfer to the freight wagon. Beau would create a diversion on the opposite side of town, drawing Hargrove's men away in a high-profile escape attempt. As night fell, the sporadic gunfire throughout Galesburg finally ceased. An uneasy quiet settled over the town, broken occasionally by the moans of the wounded being tended at the small infirmary beside the church. Reverend Parker had survived the violence unharmed and joined them at the sheriff's office, offering prayers for their safety that Beau found himself silently echoing despite years of spiritual doubt. In what might be their last moments together, Beau and Abigail sat close, hands entwined, speaking softly of possibilities neither dared fully believe in. "When this is over," Abigail said, "where would we go?" "Anywhere you want," Beau replied. "North to Canada, maybe, or west to Oregon. Somewhere we could start fresh, where no one knows my name or reputation." "I'd like that. A small place of our own, maybe horses like my father raised." She leaned her head against his shoulder. "Would you be happy with such a quiet life, after everything you've seen and done? With you?" Beau pressed a kiss to her hair. "I can't imagine anything I'd want more." The hour of parting came too soon. With final embraces and whispered promises, Abigail left with Martha for the livery stable, while Beau prepared for his role in the morning's diversion. Sheriff Marshall provided him with extra ammunition and a fresh horse, a powerful black gelding with the speed and stamina for the hard ride ahead. "Where will you go?" Marshall asked as they checked the animal's tack. "After, I mean, assuming all goes well." "Better you don't know," Beau replied. "For your sake as much as mine." Marshall nodded in understanding. "For what it's worth, Quincy, I think there's a lot more to your story than the wanted posters tell. Not many men would risk what you're risking for someone they just met." "She's worth it," Beau said simply. The sheriff smiled faintly. "I believe you, which is why I'm giving you this." He handed Beau a sealed envelope. "Open it when you're well clear of here. Might help with that fresh start you're looking for." Dawn arrived with a heavy mist that clung to the streets of Galesburg, providing additional cover for their plan. Beau positioned himself at the east end of town, waiting for Marshall's signal. 3 shots fired in rapid succession that would indicate Abigail was safely aboard the freight wagon and heading north toward Helena. The wait seemed interminable, each minute stretching into what felt like hours as Beau scanned the street for any sign of Hargrove's men. Finally, just as the sun began burning through the morning mist, the signal came. 3 sharp cracks that cut through the quiet. Beau wasted no time. Mounting the black gelding, he burst from his hiding place and thundered down the main street of Galesburg at a full gallop. As expected, his appearance drew immediate attention, shouts followed by gunfire as Hargrove's men scrambled to pursue. The chase was on, exactly as planned. Beau headed south, away from Abigail's northbound wagon, pushing his mount hard to stay ahead of pursuit while remaining close enough to keep them following. It was a dangerous game, requiring perfect timing and the riding skills he'd honed over years of survival. For 2 hours, Beau led his pursuers on a winding chase through the foothills, occasionally allowing them to get close enough for an exchange of gunfire before pulling ahead again. By mid-morning, he'd confirmed at least 8 riders on his trail, the bulk of Hargrove's force, as hoped. Only when he was certain the freight wagon had gained sufficient distance did Beau begin the next phase of his plan: escape. Veering into a narrow canyon he'd scouted during their journey to Galesburg, he prepared for his final stand. The ensuing gunfight was brutal and brief. From his elevated position among the rocks, Beau picked off 3 of his pursuers before they could find adequate cover. The remaining 5 split up, attempting to flank his position from multiple angles. Beau allowed them to think they had him trapped, waiting until they committed to their approach before making his move. Dropping a bundle of his spare clothing to suggest a fallen body, he slipped away through a narrow crevice in the canyon wall that led to where he'd hidden the black gelding. By the time Hargrove's men realized the deception, Beau was already miles away, riding hard toward the mountain pass that would take him into Idaho Territory, and eventually, he hoped, back to Abigail. Only when he was certain he'd lost all pursuit did Beau finally rest long enough to open the envelope Marshall had given him. Inside he found 2 items: a letter of introduction to a judge in Oregon who might be sympathetic to a man seeking redemption, and a notice of pardon for all crimes committed within Montana Territory, signed by the territorial governor and bearing Beau's full name. The implications were staggering. Marshall had somehow arranged a territorial pardon, not a full federal exoneration, but a significant step toward the fresh start he and Abigail had dreamed of. For the first time in years, Beau allowed himself to hope. The journey to Helena was arduous but uneventful for Abigail. Concealed beneath canvas and crates in the freight wagon, she endured 2 days of uncomfortable travel, emerging only at night when the driver, a taciturn man known only as Cooper, deemed it safe. Sheriff Marshall had provided her with a letter for Federal Marshal James Donovan, explaining the situation and vouching for the authenticity of her evidence. Cooper delivered her directly to the federal building in Helena, where she was immediately taken into protective custody. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind of depositions, legal proceedings, and gradually spreading news of Victor Hargrove's downfall. The evidence Abigail provided, combined with testimony from others who came forward once Hargrove's power began to wane, resulted in multiple indictments for fraud, extortion, and murder. Through it all, Abigail waited for word from Beau. Sheriff Marshall had sent telegrams to agreed-upon locations along the route Beau might take, but no responses had come. As spring thawed the mountain passes and brought new life to the territory, Abigail's hope began to waver, though her faith never did. She took a position as a schoolteacher in Helena, using the skills her father had cultivated in her to build a new life while she waited. The small house she rented near the school became a home of sorts, though it never felt complete. On a warm evening in late May, nearly 3 months after the events in Galesburg, Abigail sat on the porch of her little house, reading one of the few books she'd managed to save from her father's collection. The sound of approaching hoofbeats barely registered until they stopped directly in front of her gate. Looking up, she saw a figure silhouetted against the setting sun, a man dismounting from a horse that looked remarkably like the black gelding Sheriff Marshall had provided months earlier. The book fell forgotten to the porch as Abigail rose, her heart pounding with recognition and disbelief. "Beau," she whispered, barely daring to hope. He stepped into the light then, and she saw that he was changed, his hair shorter, his clothes those of a respectable rancher rather than a trail-hardened fugitive. But his eyes, when they met hers, held the same intensity she remembered. "I promised I'd find you," he said simply. Abigail flew down the steps and across the yard, throwing herself into his waiting arms with a cry of joy that brought neighbors to their windows. Beau caught her, lifting her off her feet in an embrace that spoke of months of longing and the relief of reunion. "I thought I feared," she began, unable to complete the thought. "I know," he murmured against her hair. "I'm sorry it took so long. Had some matters to settle first." Pulling back slightly, Abigail searched his face. "What matters?" Beau smiled, a full, genuine smile she'd seen only glimpses of during their time together. "Matters of my future, our future, if you still want that." "Of course I do," she said fervently. "But how, the bounties, your reputation, mostly resolved?" He took her hand, leading her to the porch where they could sit and talk privately. Marshall's pardon was the start. Used his letter to meet with the judge in Oregon who helped negotiate terms with federal authorities. Abigail listened in growing amazement as Beau explained the deal he'd struck. Testimony against several notorious outlaws he'd encountered during his years as a fugitive, in exchange for clemency on most of the charges against him. "There are conditions," he continued. "Can't carry a gun in certain territories. Have to check in with the local sheriff wherever I settle. Some fines to pay off over time." He shrugged. "Small prices for the chance at a real life." "And Hargrove?" Abigail asked. "His men?" Hargrove's facing a hanging judge in Cheyenne. "Most of his men scattered after his arrest, though a few were caught and are serving time." Beau's expression grew serious. "It's over, Abigail, really over. You're safe now." Tears of relief and happiness welled in her eyes. "And we can be together, truly." In answer, Beau reached into his pocket and withdrew a small box. "That depends," he said softly, opening it to reveal a simple gold band set with a single small diamond. "On whether you're still willing to take a chance on a reformed outlaw with a questionable past but very definite plans for the future." "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" Abigail whispered, her hand trembling as it covered his. "Abigail Rosewood," Beau said solemnly. "From the moment I found you half dead in that snowdrift, you've been changing my life in ways I never thought possible. Your courage, your faith in me, your unwavering goodness, they made me want to be the man you believed I could be. Will you marry me and let me spend the rest of my life proving worthy of the trust you've placed in me?" "Yes," she answered without hesitation, tears flowing freely now. "Yes, 1,000 times yes." The kiss that followed sealed a promise born in the harshest winter, and fulfilled in the rebirth of spring, a testament to the transformative power of love found in the most desperate circumstances. They were married 2 weeks later in a small ceremony at Helena's church, with Sheriff Marshall journeying from Galesburg to stand as Beau's best man and Martha Parker traveling with her husband to witness Abigail's happiness. Federal Marshal Donovan, who had come to respect Abigail greatly during the Hargrove investigation, gave the bride away in her father's stead. With the money recovered from the sale of her father's property restored to her, after Hargrove's conviction, Beau and Abigail purchased a modest ranch in western Oregon, far from the territories where the Reaper's name still occasionally stirred fearful whispers. There, among rolling hills and verdant valleys, they built the life they had once only dared to dream of. Beau's skill with horses and Abigail's head for business soon established their ranch as one of the finest breeding operations in the region. Within a year, Abigail had also started a small school for the children of neighboring ranches, fulfilling her long-held desire to teach. Their first child, a strong-willed boy they named James, after Abigail's father arrived in the spring of their second year together. A daughter, Elizabeth, followed 2 years later with another son, Thomas, completing their family 3 years after that. As the children grew, Beau and Abigail made no secret of their past, believing that honesty was the foundation of the values they wished to instill. They taught their children that a person's worth lay not in reputation or possessions, but in the choices made when facing life's harshest challenges. On cold winter nights, when snow blanketed their land in pristine white reminiscent of that fateful day in Wyoming Territory, Beau would often stand at the window of their comfortable home, watching his family by the hearth, Abigail reading to the children, their faces alight with wonder at her stories. In those moments, he marveled at how completely his life had transformed from the solitary, violent existence he'd once accepted as his fate. The notorious outlaw known as the Reaper had died in that Wyoming blizzard, reborn as a man capable of love, worthy of being loved in return. Sometimes, catching his reflective mood, Abigail would join him at the window, slipping her hand into his with the same trusting touch that had first breached his defenses. "Any regrets?" she would ask, though she already knew the answer. "Not one," Beau would reply, drawing her close. "Every mile, every bullet, every moment of that journey was worth it to arrive here with you." And as they stood together, watching snow fall in the moonlight much like it had on the night they first met, both silently acknowledged the precious truth at the heart of their shared history. That sometimes salvation comes in the most unexpected forms, and that love, pure, determined, unwavering love, possesses the power to redeem even the most hardened soul. By their 30th anniversary, the Quincy Ranch had become one of the most respected in Oregon, known not only for its fine horses, but for the integrity with which it was operated. Their children had grown into adults who carried forward their parents' legacy of honesty and compassion. James as a territorial judge committed to justice, Elizabeth as a doctor serving remote communities, and Thomas taking over the family ranch with his wife and 3 children. Beau and Abigail, their hair now streaked with silver but their devotion to each other unchanged, often marveled at the fullness of the life they had built together from such desperate beginnings. The notorious outlaw and the innocent young woman half dead in the snow had found in each other not just survival, but a love story that would be told in their family for generations to come.